everybody, welcome back to another video. So recently I've made a new fursona and I call her Venus. I'm still deciding on the species, but it's going to be some sort of canine. But she's a canine who is based 3,000 years in the future, so you know they've got interstellar travel and laser blasters and stuff like that. And she has a backstory. So her backstory starts when she was just a little girl on a desert planet in basically the middle of nowhere. And after a few dozen years, assassins have been terrorizing the galaxy returned, and everyone was forced to leave. But she was too late to catch an evacuation ship and was left behind with the 24 others. When the assassins came, they killed most of the other animals. She was able to hide and escape the assassins, but she had no way out of her now deserted planet. She survived on the planet, and when she was grown up, she decided it was time to leave her planet. She built a ship, a dangerous and unstable ship that would hopefully be able to get her to the nearest planet. She arrived there unharmed, but she survived as an outcast, living on the street as her kind were uncommon and feared in the area. When the assassins returned after 20 years of supposedly being gone, they were back to terrorize the galaxy. The only thing she had was a laser blaster in herself, but she took a stand for the galaxy. So now that you know her backstory, I'm making Venus into a fursuit. So since a lot of you guys seem to like my tutorials, this won't be a tutorial, but I thought you guys might like to see my process and how I went about making Venus to life. Now, I'm not sure about this now, but I might split the video into two different parts, or just put the entire thing all in one long video. But for now, I hope you enjoy my process, and yeah. So what I'm doing here is I'm just tracing out the piece for the muzzle, and this is actually the first thing I do when I make a fursuit is I trace out the piece of the muzzle and I cut it out of 3-inch foam so that I can do the next step. The next step I do is I take the two 3-inch foam pieces and I glue them together, and then once the glue is all dry, I start carving them. When I start carving is I start carving from the front of it back so I can give the sides of it a more rounded shape, and then I start by carving into the sides a little bit more to give it more of an hourglass shape. And sorry for the bad focus here. And I carve out like a divot in the back of it so that it can fit on to the nose on the mannequin better. And here what I'm doing is I'm tracing on the foam where I want to carve out the inside of the mouth. This is vital if you want the inside of the mouth to look symmetrical and not be too high or too low on one side. This is a technique I learned a while ago, well not a while ago, but pretty recently, and I wish I learned it sooner. So now what I'm doing is I'm gluing the muzzle to the head. And I start by putting a dab of hot glue on the top and seeing where the nose is, and I glue it just on the side of the nose bridge. Now I'm gluing the sides of the cheek down. And here I'm starting with the eyes. I would have used stiff felt for the eyelids, but I didn't have any stiff felt on me to the time, and I'm far away from any sort of craft store, so I didn't want to have to drive 30 miles to actually get there. So what I'm doing is I'm cutting out the eyelids out of thin pieces of foam, and then I'm taking some black fleece and I'm putting the black fleece and gluing it over the top of it so that it can basically act like the eyelid that way. If I had stiff felt, this would have been so much easier, but I didn't because I'm stupid. So now I'm just flipping it on the other side, and my camera's finally back in focus. Yay. So now what I'm doing is I'm gluing it on the back side of the fleece and getting it all ready to be cut out. So now that I have the foam all glued to the eyelid, I now cut it out, and then I start gluing the eyelids on the top of the eye blanks. And the more space inwards that you actually do, the better the following effect is. I learned this, and I wish I learned it sooner again. So now what I'm doing is I'm just gluing the eyelids onto the actual eye blanks themselves, so that the following eye effect can be good, and it will cover up the unwanted outside of the eyes. And now what I'm doing is I'm making the paper template for the lower jaw. And the lower jaw I usually carve out of 1-inch foam, as you can see here. Now I usually take it and I position it up, I don't glue it yet, but I position it where I want underneath the muzzle, and I use that to sort of figure out the shape I want it to be, and then I carve out the bottom of it, which is where I put the teeth. And now this is where I'm actually going to glue with it. I glue it the same way I glue the muzzle, which is I start from the center and then glue the sides of it. And now I'm starting with the cheeks. I start with a big rectangle, and I glue the top of it to the side of the muzzle, and I pin it down and wait for it to dry. And then once I have the cheek all glued, I trace on a triangle sort of in between the lower jaw and the muzzle, and that is how I get the smile. And of course I was stupid and cut it the wrong way because I thought it would look better, which is something that I needed to fix later on, and I sort of wish I hadn't done it, but you know, I'll make mistakes. So then I take the cheek and I glue the rest of it back. And then I like to carve out the rest of it, and then I like to chop off the rest of it and make it more rounded so it looks more like a cheek shape instead of just square. And then I start by carving down the outside edge to make it so that it's a little bit more rounded and less blocky. And then I start by gluing the rest of the cheek. Now what I'm doing here is I'm gluing on the nose. Usually I actually don't make a nose, I just make the muzzle a little extra pointy at the end and glue over the top of it. And I'm making the extra cheekbones here, so I just basically, again, sort of take a blocky shape and I pin it in place at the muzzle. And then once it's all glued down and dry, then I glue the rest of it. And I put it over the top of the existing cheek. I then pin everything down, and then I start gluing the other side of the cheek here. I couldn't really get this angle on camera very well, so I apologize for not being able to see it, but as long as you guys have that one cheek, I feel like you can sort of see what I'm doing. Now what I'm doing here is I'm positioning the eyes the way I feel like it, but I ended up changing it later on because it just didn't quite look right. Here's my progress so far. I still have to add the ears, and they're going to be more pinned back, but for now this is what I got. When I started, the face just didn't look right or something. So I angled the eyes a little bit more sideways, and I raised them up a little bit, and it looks much more natural now. So yeah, here's how the follow me eyes work. They're very sensitive, And they follow you wherever you go. So here's what I've got so far. Again, I really do apologize that I didn't actually record me making most of the base, and that was due to me taking one big recording of it and realizing that my camera had died about halfway through, and I only realized it until after I was about to turn the camera off. So I got a bunch of the parts when it came to making the base done, but not all of it's in there, so I hope you guys understand. But something about the eyes just didn't look right before, so I angled them a little bit more back, and I raised them up from the base a little bit more. I also decided that I would add some earplugs and like a hole in the ear. I was originally gonna do like a chip in the ear, but based on the way the ear actually curved, cutting the chip in it actually made it so it didn't keep that bend it was going for, so I ended up just patching it again. And I'm still gonna glue the ears back a little bit more. And yeah, so that's my progress right now. So the hair on this character is actually the same color on the red on the fur, and I wanted the hair on the top to actually look like hair and not just extra fur. But since they're the exact same color, that meant I couldn't just buy a wig and modify it to look good on my fursuit. I had to sort of figure out how to make the red fur look like hair. And what I figured out, heat. Fur fibers are plastic, so if you heat them up, they'll sort of curl, and you can actually sort of bend them into shape like you can with EVA foam. So this is the one that I used the heat gun on. So you can see it's like a lot more frizzy. It's a lot more frizzy and a lot more puffy. And this is the fur that I hadn't done anything to. And I think to get that effect I'm going for, I'm just gonna make like 6 or 7 spikes and sort of just like put them up on the top of the head pretty close together. Like basically just sew spikes and then glue them onto the head. And then it won't just look like one giant clump, it'll also look like bunches of it. Okay, so now I'm actually starting to make the paper template. So this, I believe, that I'm making right now is a medium spike, and I wanted to make it so that it wasn't just one length, so I made 3 sizes. I made a big spike, a medium spike, and a small spike. The big spikes would be basically in the middle, the medium spikes would be surrounding the large one, and the small spikes will be like in the front of the head and the very back of the head. So there's me test fitting how the sizes fit and look on the head, and I liked how these looked. So here I'm starting to trace all the pieces on the fur, and I was going to machine sew all these, so I basically cut out 2 pieces for one, and I labeled them like S1 and SX, S1X. The X resembled the pattern piece that got flipped, and the number on it resembled which number of the size it was. I ended up making 6 little ones, 6 medium ones, and 6 large ones, but I actually used like only half of the pieces I thought I was going to be using, so unfortunately I ended up throwing most of them away. Because the pieces I used were just like too small for me to use them for anything else. It made me feel bad, but I wasn't actually able to use them for anything else that I thought I would use them for. So unfortunately I was forced to throw them away. So here's now where I actually start cutting out all the pieces. Cutting the pieces was an absolute pain because it was so repetitive and there were so many pieces and I didn't even end up using all of them. And it actually made my back and my neck hurt a lot because you're just sitting at that angle for so long and you just have to bend over a lot and you're sitting in a weird way. So actually I stopped recording at a part of this and ended up moving and ended up moving my cutting place to my table and moving a chair there so that I didn't have as much strain on my back as I usually would have. So this here that I'm doing now is how I actually ended up putting all of the hair tufts together, well, the hair spikes, I guess. And I decided to only really record me doing one because it wasn't really going to be useful for me to record both of them because they would just get repetitive and it wouldn't have actually really been useful for you guys. So what I ended up doing was I took the two spikes and I sewed them together with my sewing machine on a zigzag stitch to make it extra strong. And then after that, I brushed out all the tufts to get out of the extra edges and insided them out, stuffed them, and glued them onto the head. And I was also real stupid in this part because I completely forgot to record me actually adding all the hair tufts. So I'll sort of do a description of what I did. First, I glued the back ones on, which were small ones, I believe. And then I glued the medium ones on, and I basically layered them going from back to front since it would be an easier angle for me to get at. I probably should have furred the ears first, but I was eager to see how making the hair would turn out, so I did it, and I might actually have trouble making the ears now. So yeah, that's what I got. It looks a lot like hair, and I used my heat gun to heat up the fur, and then I brushed it so it looked more frizzy like hair. That is all for this part. I hope you guys enjoyed part 1 of making Venus. The next part will be getting to adding little details such as teeth, lining the mouth, and making the nose, and stuff like that. I'm debating whether I should save making the ears for when I start furring everything, but I may actually add the ears since I actually don't really make them a part of furring. I make the ears first. But yeah, stay tuned for part 2. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys again in another video. Bye!